My name is Rachel Lee Ricards, and I am the new lead events and conferences at the OHTN. And I want to thank you all for joining today. And I would like to begin with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that this session is taking place on the traditional territories of many Indigenous peoples, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. We recognize that Indigenous communities continue to experience the ongoing impacts of colonization, including inequities in health, mental health, housing, and access to care as they age. As we come together to discuss legal practical considerations for aging with HIV, we do so with a commitment to equity, dignity, and cultural responsive care for communities. Just a bit of housekeeping. Please hold your questions to the end of the presentation, where we'll have a dedicated Q&A and a time where you can post your questions, and the chat will ask during the Q&A period. Now on to our session. As people living with HIV and AIDS, legal and system-related issues can have a significant impact on health, stability, and quality of life. During this session, we'll explore key legal considerations related to income supports, healthcare access, housing, and future planning for older adults living with HIV. Delivered through a legal lens, the session will provide participants with practical information to help support informed decision-making, access to services, and planning for future care and life transitions. Our speaker today is Talia Wolfe. They are a staff lawyer at the HIV and AIDS Legal Clinic, Ontario, HALCO. Their work at HALCO focuses on providing free legal assistance regarding matters of income assistance, access to healthcare, discrimination, breaches of privacy, and HIV criminalization for people living with HIV. Please welcome Talia Wolfe.
All right. Hello, everybody. So nice to be chatting with you, albeit over Zoom. My name is Talia, and I am one of the staff lawyers at HALCO. I'm going to be doing a presentation today on a bunch of different things regarding HIV and aging and the law. What I will say as we get in is that this is a lot of information. And if I were to deep dive into all these issues, we'd be here for hours. So this is going to be a little bit of just like a primer more than anything. And then we will have time at the end to answer questions if you have specific questions, or to get in touch with me if you're looking for more in-depth conversations about what we're talking about. But I'm going for breadth rather than depth today. So let's share the screen and go from there. All right. Everyone can see it? Give me a thumbs up. We're all good? Perfect. Yep, so I know we already did a wonderful land acknowledgement from Rachel Lee, but I'm going to do another one just because I always think it's important whenever I talk about the law to recognize how geographic our legal system is. You know, the laws that we have to abide by, the things that are controlling what we do and what is allowed and what is not, are very, very location based. I sit here in Toronto, I have to abide by the city of Toronto's laws and Ontario's and Canada's. And if I were to physically go somewhere else, those rules may change. So always incredibly important in any conversation about legal rules, practices, procedures to reflect on how those governments have been able to gain power to enact those laws and the populations of people that have been cast aside in order to give these people those powers. So I'm speaking here in Toronto. That's Treaty 13 territory, the traditional homes of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and all of the different First Nations, Inuit, Métis families, relatives that have called urban Toronto home for thousands of years. And for folks who are not talking to me in Toronto, I urge you to look up those traditional lands that you're sitting on right now and reflect on that as well. So in terms of a little bit of an agenda, as I said, I'm going to cover a bunch of different things and try not to get caught in the weeds too much. I'll start with who I am and what my legal clinic is, so you folks can have a better understanding of what free legal assistance is available. I'll talk about why this presentation is important, what it means to age with HIV, and then we're going to get into four legal topics. I'm going to talk about income assistance, and that'll probably be the biggest amount of time that we're going to spend on that. I'll talk briefly about health benefits that are available. We'll talk very briefly about some housing considerations to think about. And then I'll talk a little bit about planning ahead, so wills and powers of attorney. And then I'll leave you guys with some resources and supports for further work. I'm a lawyer. I'm pretty careful with my words. I'm going to make a couple of disclaimers and caveats up front. I know this presentation is being recorded, so I will mention that this is my presentation. I made this PowerPoint. Feel free to consult it to, do what we're all doing with this recording, but it's mine. And also, it's just a PowerPoint, right? We can make mistakes all the time. The important thing is what I'm saying. This is just a tool for us all to follow along with. So when there are discrepancies or if something is strange, focus on what I'm saying and not whatever typo I've made on the PowerPoint. What I'll also say is that what I'm doing right now is giving everybody legal information. And that's different than giving you legal advice in a really important way. Legal information is general. I'm telling you about the rules, I'm telling you about the policies, I'm telling you about the things that I commonly see. And it's nothing to do with you or the facts of a particular situation. It's general. Legal advice is specific. When you call me, we have a conversation. I'm learning about the actual substance of the problem that's going on, and I'm giving you my opinion on what the risks and benefits of proceeding are. And that's not what I'm doing right now. So if you want to have that conversation with me, or you have a client who wants to have that conversation with me, that's when you call me and we have a one-on-one chat. What I'll also say is that the law changes all the time, right? What's true today, they could pass a law tonight, they would no longer be true tomorrow. So this presentation is good as of today, but if you're going to rely on the information that I'm talking about, it's good to double check to make sure things are still true as they move into the future. So who am I? Who is HALCO? So HALCO is part of a system called Legal Aid Ontario, LAO. And that is Ontario's system for legal advice and representation for low-income people in the province. And it's a very big organization with a bunch of different kinds of legal services that are offered. The biggest one is something that's called the certificate program, which is for refugee law or family law or criminal law if you're facing incarceration. And you call up Legal Aid Ontario, you tell them about your finances, and they give you a certificate. And you take that certificate to a private lawyer of your choice, and Legal Aid Ontario pays for your lawyer. The next sort of biggest category of lawyers in LAO is duty counsel, which are lawyers that work in courthouse. And if you show up to court day of and you don't have a legal representative, these are the folks who can help you out. The third category is senior counsel, which is Legal Aid Ontario's in-house lawyers. If you come to them with a very complex problem, instead of giving you the money to go to a private lawyer, they sometimes might just take your file on themselves. And the last category is the clinic system. And again, we love to categorize things. There are two types of clinic system or of legal clinics. The first is the system of community clinics. So Ontario is divided up into regions, and every person, by virtue of their postal code, has a clinic that they can go to access free legal services as long as they're financially eligible. These clinics will always do housing law and they will always do social assistance law. But depending on the needs of the community, they might have other areas of law as well, like immigration law, employment law, things like that. But there are also specialty clinics, which are province-wide, and they focus either on specific types of law or specific populations. So there are clinics for housing law, there's clinics for elderly folks, there are clinics for Indigenous peoples, there's clinics that focus on disability law. And that's the type of clinic that HALCO is. So HALCO is a specialty clinic, and our focus is on serving people who are living with HIV in Ontario. And we do that by addressing a really wide range of legal topics. We really do anything from income assistance to privacy to healthcare to immigration to criminal law. We're doing a lot of stuff. And the kind of work that we do is very varied. Sometimes I'm giving you referrals to somebody who's better able to help you. Sometimes I'm talking to you on the phone and giving you some advice. Sometimes I'm representing you. Sometimes we're going to court to intervene for the interest of all people living with HIV, really wide range of services. So, with that out of the way, why are we having this presentation to begin with? The truth is that 30 years ago, I could not have given a presentation on aging with HIV because people who were living with HIV weren't really aging. And with all of the advancements in medication and treatment and prevention, it's more common that people are living very long lives with HIV. And because this is a new phenomenon, we don't have a great grasp on the implications of living with a long-term HIV infection, taking HIV medication for decades. It's more unpredictable. And because of that unpredictability, it's important that you plan for the end of your life as early as possible because you don't know when the scales might tip and you wish you had done something sooner. So that's the sort of goal of this presentation is to give people as much information as possible as early as possible so that they can be doing that planning for a potentially unpredictable aging process. As I said, the bulk of this presentation is going to be on income assistance. I'm going to do my very best to not get caught up in the numbers and in the math. Some of it is a little bit unavoidable, but if you want to have a real conversation with me with real people's numbers, we can do that later. So before we talk about aging, I'll talk about just income support in general. In Ontario, there are two main streams for income support, Ontario Works and ODSP. These are financial supports and health benefits. Ontario Works is for anybody who's not currently working in the province. ODSP is for folks who are living with disabilities. I will note that people who are living with HIV are automatically medically eligible for ODSP. So if you have clients who are living with HIV and they're not earning a good income, it might be worth it to look into applying to ODSP. And the eligibility is partly financial, looking at income, looking at assets, but it's pretty straightforward. It is a common misconception that there is an upper age limit to being eligible for ODSP, and that is untrue. There is no upper limit. You do not get kicked off of ODSP when you turn 65. What happens in practice is that when you turn 65, you get access to better programs than ODSP, and you no longer need it. But the eligibility criteria is not a one-to-one match for these programs. So it's not all that uncommon that people would be eligible for ODSP and not eligible for some of the other programs that we're about to talk about. It would need to stay on ODSP, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever. I will say this misconception happens also inside of ODSP. I've seen not unfrequently caseworkers wanting to shift people off of their program. Don't let them do that because there is no upper limit. And what I will also say is that there are ways to leave ODSP's monetary benefits, but still maintain your health benefits. It's not perfect. It doesn't always happen, but it is an option for some people. And I'll talk about that when we get to health benefits. So the first program that I'll talk about is something called Old Age Security, OAS. This is a monthly pension from the government for anybody who's over the age of 65. Sometimes they will automatically enroll you. Sometimes you get lost in the shuffle. My advice is always 11 months before you turn 65. So you've just had your 64th birthday. Everything is fine. Call Service Canada and see what's going on, just to make sure that the transition is as seamless as it can be. And if you miss this, you also have 11 months of retroactive payment. So if you're 65 and a half and you've never received an old age security check, you could get retroactive payment back to your 65th birthday up to 11 months. The eligibility to get old age security is that you are a citizen or a resident and you have lived in Canada for at least 10 years since you turned 18. And that's the minimum. and you won't get the total amount of old age security until you've been in Canada for 40 years since you've turned 18. In terms of like how much you're getting, it's pretty flexible. If you start receiving it at 65, you get, and these are for like the most recent-ish numbers, they change every couple of years with inflation, but you get about $730 a month. If you choose to delay the payments till you turn 75, you can get maybe $800 a month. And that will start to decrease as you are a person who's earning more money, up to if you had an income of like $142,000, that's when you're going to get a $0 check from old age security. Some people can choose to delay these payments. They can delay it all the way up to the age of 70, to get those bigger monthly payments. But if clients are low income and they're eligible for the guaranteed income supplement, which I'm going to talk about in a second, they shouldn't delay because the combined impact of both of those income sources is much greater than what you would get if you delayed it by a couple of years. I'll note just a couple of things. You don't have to be retired to earn old age security. You can still be working. It is taxable. You can elect to have those taxes taken out up front, or you can hold it back and pay it back in tax season. And if you are out of Canada for more than 6 months at a time, they're going to stop those payments. They'll start them again when you come back, but you can't, retire in Costa Rica and still get a Canadian pension. So, as I said, the guaranteed income supplement is an additional benefit for seniors who are low income. That definition of low income is about $22,000 a year of earning. So really someone who's just receiving like ODSP or OW or something like that, like a income support level of income. And they top up the old age security. So an individual is going to get about $1,000 extra on top of that 730 that we were talking about. And if there's two of you in a couple, each of you would receive 650, so just a little bit above that as a couple. This is something that you need to continuously prove. And so they're going to recheck your income every year. And for clients who are not good at checking their mail or responding to communications, you don't message them back, they assume you're no longer eligible. And you can fix it, but it's a little bit of a headache. So keep on top of those communications. But I will note that this is not taxable income. So you get this whole amount free and clear, and you don't have to worry about setting it aside for taxes. Conversely, another option for accessing income support when you age is the Canadian Pension Plan, CPP. And that is a retirement pension from the government of Canada. And it has different eligibility criteria. The first is that you have to be at least 60 years of age, and you have to have made at least one valid CPP contribution in your lifetime. And we will talk about this a little bit more, but CPP contributions are made from your employment. So when you get your check back from your employer or whatever, and a lot of it has been deducted, one of those deductions is a contribution to the country's pension that you get to access when you retire. You can push that back up to age 70, and then you're getting more money every month. And I will note, like all things, Quebec has decided to do something different. So Quebec has its own pension plan that is not related to this. I'm not going to talk about it, but I'll mention that. The standard age is 65. You can elect earlier to go to 60 or later to push it to 70. And you can get retroactive payments up to 12 months, but only back to the age of 65. You can't be 62 and say, oh, I wish I started last year. They won't let you do that. Unlike old age security, which is set numbers every year, the amount that you get from CPP depends on your work history. It depends on your average earnings and your lifespan of employment. And so I can't really give you a standard number. They will drop the lowest 8 years of earnings, and also any time that you were unemployed raising children or on disability leave. So they're trying to get a fair reflection of your average earnings rather than disadvantaging people who are not earning as much based on valid reasons. Average, maybe $800 a month. They do set a maximum. This year's or last year's maximum is $1,400. That does change every year. People can get an estimate on My Service Canada. They take your tax info and they can give you a guess as to what it might be. Um, but there is no minimum. Yeah, I've seen people get CPP checks of like 12 cents every month. Like they really, if you really have not worked that much, averaging it out is not all that much. Um, but I will note that CPP is also taxable. So you either withhold the taxes up front or you pay them back after. I will note that CPP and CPPD are different. Lots of people can access CPPD, which is the Canadian Pension Plan Disability Benefit, well before they turn 65. This is a benefit for people who were working but are no longer working because of a disability. I will note that if people are on CPPD and they turn 65, their benefits will automatically shift to CPP regular. And oftentimes your CPPD benefits are higher than your regular Canadian pension benefits. And so people get worried that they're getting a smaller check from CPP every month when they turn 65. But as we've discussed, they're also going to start receiving things like old age security or the guaranteed income supplement. So you're losing a bit of one, but gaining a lot more of another. So it's not often a cause for concern. The last one that I will mention is an Ontario exclusive. It's called the Guaranteed Annual Income System, GAINS, and it's automatically attached to folks who are already on Old Age Security Guaranteed Income Supplement, OAS GIS. You don't need to apply. Ontario is going to do it automatically. And it's essentially reflecting that it's a little bit more expensive to live in Ontario than in other provinces. Ontario has a little bit of money. They might as well give it back to their seniors. And in addition to having those general Canadian residency requirements for accessing OAS GIS, they have an additional Ontario residency requirement, which is either the last 12 months or a total of 20 years since you turned 18. They want you to like be from Ontario or in Ontario to access this benefit. And it's not a whole much. Last year it was $87, but that's better than nothing. So how do these all interact? These are a whole bunch of different systems. You can receive CPP and OAS GIS gains all together stacked with no issue. You can get them both on top of each other added together. But all of these things are deducted dollar for dollar from ODSP. So when I said at the beginning, people leave ODSP because they get better sources of income. If you were getting $1,400 from ODSP, but now you're getting $1,700 from OAS GIS and another $600 from CPP, that's way more than you're getting from ODSP. So that's why you're no longer eligible. It's not due to your age, it's due to your other sources of income. And these other things, they're like a bunch of tack-ons to CPP. They all add up to the maximum benefit. So if you're receiving survivor benefits, like your partner was receiving CPP benefits and then passed away early, you're getting some of those credits. They're not going to go past the maximum of that $1,400 that we spoke about. So, as I said, the eligibility criteria for all these programs are not one-to-one. So there are a lot of instances when people might need to stay on ODSP. They don't get these other programs that we were talking about. For example, newcomers to Canada. Old age security requires at least 10 years of Canadian residency. If you've just come to Canada in the last 4 years, you're not eligible for that program. CPP is calculated by your work experience. If you've never really had any work experience, you have nothing to contribute. Or as I said, you're getting that 12-cent check, and that's not enough to sustain yourself. And also, you may just have a different kind of immigration status. So for people who are applicants for certain kinds of immigration status, so for permanent residency or refugee, if they haven't been confirmed yet, but they're in the process of applying, they're eligible for ODSP, but they need those statuses to be confirmed to get OAS GIS. So their immigration status would only need to make them eligible for ODSP still. Just as a reminder for folks interacting with ODSP in this transition, All these things are, as I said, deducted dollar for dollar. And the client does not have the opportunity to like opt out switching. Part of the promise that you make to ODSP when you get on the program is that you will do your best to look for other sources of income. So it's an obligation that you have to apply for things like CPP, OAS, GIS, and they'll get upset with you if you don't. Um, but I will also note that you have to tell ODSP when you're starting to receive these other sources of income. And if you start receiving double without it being properly deducted, ODSP is going to expect you to pay them back for all the money that they gave you in error. And that's called an overpayment, and you have to pay it back. I will note in practice, don't let ODSP kick you off until you've already started receiving that new source of income. It's much better to pay back a month of ODSP with this other money that you've just gotten rather than going some number of months without money to pay for food or rent or things like that. If it's just going to be a couple months of a transition, better fix it on the back end than stop those payments and have something go wrong and now you really don't have enough money to pay for anything. So that was all the income. We're going to breeze through the next two pretty quickly. In terms of health benefits, the biggest thing to know when people turn 65 is they get to access the Ontario Drug Benefit, which is run through OHIP. And it says that everyone who's over the age of 65 and is eligible for OHIP qualifies to pay $100 a year to OHIP, and then any prescription they want is $6, regardless of how expensive it actually is. And this is automatic. It's in their system. The day you turn 65, you go to the pharmacy, they scan your health card. It's going to say they have to pay $6. If you are a low-income senior, there's actually a second program within this one called the Seniors Co-Payment Program. And it's an additional level of financial assistance. So they waive the annual deductible. There's no $100 payment. And instead of paying $6, you pay $2 per prescription. And just from experience, they're really not charging that $2 fee very often. The income threshold is $25,000 a year for an individual, or $41,500 for a couple. But I will note this is not an automatic enrollment process. You have to actively do this yourself. There's a website to sign in, and you get a 3-month grace period on either side of your 65th birthday. So you can do it in advance or get reimbursed for payments made after 3 months. I teased this earlier, but some people can still access ODSP health benefits even when they leave for income reasons. And that's through a program called the Extended Health Benefit, the EHB. And the rule for eligibility is when your health benefits or your health costs are greater than your new income, essentially, different from when it was ODSP. So in general, you can't count costs that are covered by other programs. So when seniors are eligible for OHIP for this coverage, they can't count the like out-of-pocket potential costs of these meds when OHIP is actually covering them. If they're only actually paying $6, they don't get to say it would be $25,000 if they didn't have that coverage. But there is some precedent to argue that people should be able to access this coverage still. Case-by-case basis, not a bad idea to get in touch if you think it's applicable. But I will note that it has to be done within 30 days of leaving ODSP, and caseworkers are bad at asking about this. So it's important to be proactive, say, hey, can you give me some more information about applying for the EHB as I'm transitioning off of this program. Another big topic for seniors is looking at in-home care. So people who are still trying to age in place, they're not trying to move somewhere else for care, but they want to see what kind of financial supports exist or access to in-home care looks like. So for seniors who are OHIP insured, they can access Ontario Health at Home. This used to be called the LIMS. They're now changed their name. It's the exact same thing. And this is OHIP coverage for in-home care following an injury or illness, and they provide supports like hygiene, medication support, general cleanliness tasks. If it's prescribed by a doctor, there's no cost for it. It's OHIP covered, but it's limited. You're not getting someone to be with you 24 hours a day. Somebody might come by for 45 minutes every day to help you take a shower or something like that. So people will often supplement that with private coverage. These costs and options and availability vary widely. Do research before you hire anybody. In terms of housing, there are two things that I think are really important for seniors. The first is the impact of RGI, right? RGI is rent geared to income. These are subsidized housing opportunities where the rent that you pay is proportionate to your income. To get into one of these spaces, even in general, is a very long wait list. They're all municipally run, so every city has their own RGI waitlist and infrastructure. In Toronto, we have separate lists for seniors buildings, so buildings that are just for people who are aging and they have better supports for aging in place. You can apply directly to a seniors home, or you can say, I'm already on the list, put me on the seniors list now. Some people ask me if it's a faster wait than general. I say no, because even though there's less people, there's also less spaces. The proportions stay the same. And for those who are unfamiliar with the RGI waitlist, it's about 8 to 10 years for like a bachelor unit if you want more bedrooms, maybe closer to 15 years. So that's what I mean when I say a very long wait list. But what is really important is that for anybody who's already on RGI, when your income changes from everything that we were just talking about, your rent will change because it's rent geared to income. And if you don't tell the RGI managers that you have a new source of income, it's as if you are not paying the right amount of rent. And that's a rent arrear, and they can proceed with eviction if it's been a really long time. It's manageable to get fixed. You back pay a bunch of stuff and it works out. You're not often getting evicted for this, but it's a real headache. People are often concerned because if they're getting more money, their rent is going to go up, and they're like, oh, then why would I do this? It's taking all my money. It's not, because rent geared to income sets your rent at a proportion of your total income. So while the amount you're paying in rent will go up, it's the same ratio as it was before. It's not taking all of the new money that you're now getting from these better sources. When people can't age in place and they need to access supports more long term, they can choose to look into something called public long-term care homes. And in Toronto, and again, in every municipality, the municipality will operate homes with 24-hour care. So nursing, medical, food, laundry, all that kind of stuff. You will apply again through Ontario Health and Home. They will have long wait lists. You can't just say, oh, I want to move into one tomorrow and do that. And you also often have a very short time frame to commit. So if you put yourself on a wait list, you might get a call, say, we have a bed, be here in 36 hours or something like that to claim it, or they're going to give it to somebody else. And once you're in one, it's pretty difficult to transfer to a new one. You get there and you really don't like the vibe, it's hard to get an approved transfer to a different facility. These things aren't free because essentially you're living there, you should be paying some part of rent or whatever. The costs vary widely depending on the municipality and the services and all that other stuff. There are some financial benefits that exist to reduce that cost that you can apply for. And then, as always, there are always private options for retirement homes. The quality of these and the cost of these vary widely. You might have to pay for a whole lot of stuff. And as a lawyer, I will note they are a very complicated legal framework in terms of how tenancy law interacts with retirement homes and all this other kind of stuff. So when things go wrong, get a lawyer as soon as you can. All right, last section. We're powering through, it's all good. So maybe the most infamous component of aging is making some planning ahead documents. And the two that we talk about is a will and a power of attorney. These are documents that you prepare when you are well in case of injury, illness, or death. And they must be made while you have capacity. You can't do this way at the end of your life. It's got to be when you're doing 100%. Powers of attorney are legal documents that control decision making while you are alive, but incapable of making your own decisions, like your medical care, the care of your children, control of your finances. And wills are made for decisions after you pass away. So funerals, distribution of assets, that kind of stuff. Powers of attorney are sometimes also called substitute decision maker documents. And there are two kinds. They can be the same, but you can split them up into two if you want. Either powers of attorney for personal care, so medical decisions, hygiene, that kind of stuff, and power of attorney for property, so things like paying your rent, dealing with your finances, that stuff. You can appoint more than one person to be your attorney. It can also be one. It can be one person for the two of these things altogether. You do what you want. And you can keep changing it as long as you have capacity to do so. So you can just put someone down now, and if you fall out with them in 10 years, you strike them from the list, you write a new person's name. That's totally fine. And this power that you grant ends when you die. And that's when your will takes over. If you do not have a power of attorney and you need one, the court is going to decide who your power of attorney is. And they just have like a statutory list that they go through based on who they think is closest to you. And they'll say, your parents, no, your spouse, no, your children, no, and they'll just go down the list of relatives. And if you really just have nobody, they're going to appoint the public guardian and trustee, which is a part of the Ontario government whose whole job it is to oversee a lot of people. I would advise having somebody in writing to avoid that possibility. If you disagree with the idea that you need an active power of attorney, you think you should be making your own decisions, and you've already been found by like a doctor or something to not have that capacity, you can challenge that finding in court. You can go to the consenting capacity board and ask a court to find you capable once again. Do not do this without a lawyer. Please, please, please get a lawyer to help you. This is a complex legal argument. I've said capacity a couple times. What do I mean by this? This is not a black and white definition. There's no real test where you say, oh, check mark, check mark, check mark. Okay, you have capacity. Okay, you don't. It's also different from a medical consideration of capacity. This is a very legal term when I'm talking. Generally, you're going to presume everybody has capacity unless there's evidence to the contrary. So we're assuming that everyone can make decisions unless there's a lot of stuff saying maybe they shouldn't. And the core components are not that you're like fully on the ball and absolutely getting everything. It's pretty straightforward. It's, do you understand the information that's being told to you? And do you appreciate the reasonably foreseeable consequences of the decision? Do you get what I'm saying to you, and do you understand the consequences of it? And it's totally fair to have capacity for some decisions, but not all decisions. You know, we can all anticipate that people might not be able to manage their investments anymore, but are still perfectly capable of deciding whether they're going to take a shower or not, right? There's definitely a spectrum for all of that. What I will note is that your power of attorney document contains no instructions. It just sets out who has the power to make those decisions for you. The document that's articulating what you want to happen is called your advance directive or your living will. And it's going to give those instructions, guidance, care that you want to happen. Oftentimes it's phrased less as a, if this, do that, and more of a, these are the values that are important to me. This is my faith. This is my belief of what should happen in the end of my life, just so that, you know, end of life is unpredictable. The last thing you want is for something to happen that you never considered, and then your power of attorney has no instructions for how you want to proceed. Guidance is better than instructions usually. But this is technically not a legal document, right? It's not something that you're getting a lawyer to draft for you necessarily. Um, but your substitute decision maker, your power of attorney, can't act in contrast to it. So if you have an advance directive that says do not resuscitate, for example, your power of attorney can't say, well, I want you to resuscitate that person if they have access to this document. Wills, on the other hand, as we said, take effect after you die. The first thing that your will is going to do is appoint an executor. So the person who's going to carry out your wishes. And then it's going to list those wishes. So it is going to include instructions in your will. And it'll talk about what you want your funeral to be, how to take care of your children, how do you want to divide your estate, what gifts you want to give out, all that kind of stuff. If it's simple, right? If you just have like a savings account and you're renting an apartment and you have that one guitar that you really like and that's about it, you don't have to go to court. You can just do it yourself. Larger estates that have businesses, property and stuff need to go to court to do something called probate, where a judge oversees the distribution of the will and makes sure that the executor is following your instructions, and the court is there to decide ambiguities if the writing is unclear about what those instructions are. Like I said before, you have to have capacity while you're drafting your will. And it's a good idea to make a new one every time your life circumstances change, right? You don't want a situation where you've had one kid, you write a will, you have a second kid, you haven't updated the will, and then you die, and only one out of your two kids gets your assets. You want to make sure that you're keeping it relevant. If you die without a will, it's called dying intestate. And unless you have a very nice person in your life who's going to apply to court to take on this responsibility themselves, the court's just going to do it. And they're going to divide your estate based on statutory guidelines, which is like, if you have a spouse, give it all to your spouse. If you have kids, divide it to your kids. And they don't care if like, oh, your only one relative is your brother who you hate. They don't care about that. They're going to give it all to him. What I will note, a lot of the times in our modern world, being married to somebody and being a common law spouse are legally identical. Dying intestate is one of these relics where there is a clear difference. And common law partners who you are not married to do not have a statutory interest in your estate if you die without a will. So it's very important if you or your clients or whoever are living with a partner that they're not married to, that they would want to have their estate if they died, to write a will. Because if they don't have a will, that partner's not going to get anything, regardless of how close they are. So the tough part is that legal aid Ontario and clinics don't really practice wills and estates law. This is really a private law space, and that's a gap for low-income people who do still need these documents. If it's relatively simple, there are online tools for free that can help you craft wills and powers of attorney. I've put a link here. Steps to Justice just generally is a really, really great legal information website. But it will take you through the drafting of a will and a power of attorney. Technically doesn't need to be notarized, but absolutely needs to be signed and witnessed. So you can do it for low cost. If there's a little bit more of a complicated estate, like there's children, there's maybe a house or something like that, it's better to just like take an hour of a lawyer's time to help them at least give you advice than do it on your own. There are some low-cost online tools to help you draft one online, and there are some other resources here that you can connect with. So in terms of resources that exist, when issues are related to people's HIV, including disability supports, you can call me. If you have questions related specifically to aging or programs for seniors, feel free to call me, but you can also connect with another legal aid clinic called the Advocacy Center for the Elderly, ACE. They're very, very wonderful people. And they also have a really incredible resource library on their website that has easy to understand information about many different areas of law impacting seniors. And when issues are related just more broadly to income assistance or housing, you can go to community clinic. This is the link to search by postal code for where you're supposed to go. But I will note now, new, very exciting, another legal aid clinic called the Income Security Advocacy Center, or ISAC, which is an advocacy legal aid clinic for folks who are accessing income assistance in many different ways. They have, in the last month or so, created a guide, one for clients and one for technically healthcare practitioners, but service providers of any kind, on turning 65 and receiving social assistance in healthcare. So something that really just simply details that transition. The link is here. You can just Google ISAC. It's like the first thing on their website right now. In terms of like non-legal resources, as I said, Steps to Justice, always recommend. Such a great website. The government has a lot of great resources, all this other fun stuff. So that was my presentation. I tried to get through it as quickly and painlessly as possible. This is my contact information for folks who want to chat with me directly. But as I said, I'm here to answer some questions for the next 10 minutes or so.